GLP, NLA. Have you heard those words and you were a little bit confused? Have you gotten into an argument about Gestalt language processing? Well, you're in for a treat today. In this episode, I'm going to share for you what some of those different letters mean. What does GLP mean? What does NLA mean? What do those things mean? I'm also going to share with you a very specific case study with a BCBA and an SLP and a conflict they are having around Gestalt language processing, stages of GLP, answering personal safety questions. We're going to break all that down. I'm also going to talk about the systematic review that came out recently, probably in December, and I have information about that in the show notes. I would love to hear from you. How are your therapy teams navigating these contentious at times collaboration situations around Gestalt language processing? We have an ethics course here in the ABA Speech Connection where we cover it, but I like to do little mini shows like this where we talk about very specific case studies. So if that's something that you've been struggling with as a therapy team, make sure that you listen in, and I can't wait to get into this mini episode all about Gestalt language processing. I'm Rose Griffin, a speech therapist, board-certified behavior analyst, and founder of ABA Speech. It wasn't all that long ago that I felt overwhelmed by providing therapy for my autistic students and any students who were not yet speaking. Fast forward through many doubts, tears, research, and courses, and you will see the framework that I use today and share with over 60,000 readers weekly. One that will help you support your students and feel more confident in the process. I created the ABA Speech podcast to give you simple, step-by-step strategies to help you reach all of your students wherever they are on their communication journeys. If you're a speech therapist, BCBA, RBT student, or parent who's looking to help all students develop a way to communicate with the world, you are in the right place, friend. Let's get started. Have you ever gotten into a disagreement with a fellow clinician over Gestalt language processing or AAC? That is what we're going to talk about today. I wanted to come on and do a solo show. I feel like I haven't just broke it down for you and shared about my lived experiences being both a speech therapist and BCBA. And recently, actually in August, I started providing a course that is 1 hour. It is for speech therapists and BCBAs and RBTs. It is called Navigating Conflict Ethically with a focus on AAC, verbal imitation, and Gestalt language processing. And I started that course because we all need ethics. BCBAs need 4 hours each certification cycle, which is kind of a lot. And I teach in ethics class, or taught, got a little too busy recently, but I teach in ethics class at Kent State for people becoming BCBAs. And because I spend too much time on social media, even though I have a team that helps me, and I am always thinking about answering all the questions that I get and try to in my Instagram direct messages or in my LinkedIn messages, or people respond to the emails that I send every week. And even, hopping on a 15-minute call with people that reach out in various ways, I feel like there are some struggles in the area of navigating how to work through collaboration around Gestalt language processing. And we've covered it on the podcast, and I've been talking about it by doing this talk and then doing more general talks about the ethics of SLP BCBA collaboration for groups in Texas and California and Connecticut. And I get a lot of different questions and case studies. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about today is that there is a lot of questioning. Is there evidence for Gestalt language processing? And the thing is, Gestalt language processing is very, very popular. It is very, very popular on social media. And there are a lot of people who get information that informs their therapeutic practice on social media. There are also a lot of people who are questioning whether there is research and how to collaborate around Gestalt language processing. I don't have hard, concrete answers because ethics is kind of tricky to work through. But that's why I came up with this ethics course, which we'll put now. I do it live each month, usually, but it's also a self-paced course in our CEU library at the ABA Speech Connection. So I have a membership with over 500 members now, and we provide ASHA and ACEUs. And so you can take it as a recorded course. One of the people that took the course recently said, "Hey, I loved this course, great information, but I was a little confused by some of the jargon that you use during the course." So in this episode, I'm going to just talk a little bit about some of those things that you may see different places, GLP, NLA, what does that mean? Just to give you familiarity of what those terms mean. Should you take the course? Should you see something that I post on social media? I don't want anybody to not understand something because there's jargon. And so that goes back to Dr. Matthew Broadhead, former podcast guest, article talking about the framework for working together, speech therapists and BCBAs. And one of the first things he has on that framework is, do you have any familiarity with the treatment? And so today I'm not going to go into Gestalt language processing because I'm not really a proponent for it. And I'm not an expert by any stretch, but I want people to feel comfortable with just some of the terms. And then I want to share with you a case study. Somebody that has taken one of my courses recently shared with me a very real world difficulty that they are having. And I know that this person is not the only one that's navigating this very specific case. And so that's what I wanted to share on today's episode. So there's a really wonderful, informative article that has come out. I have talked about it. I think when I did my ASHA debrief, I talked all about being at the ASHA conference, and it felt like it could be a Gestalt conference because there's just so many topics about Gestalt. And people are so emotionally charged about this topic. And the thing that I realized is somebody who's kind of away from it looking in is speech therapists who use Gestalt language processing, those people are not going to go away. They're growing in numbers every day. And people who are traditionally BCBAs or maybe critical of Gestalt language processing are here and they're growing in numbers as well. And we really don't want our clients to suffer. And we don't want to suffer burnout too, feeling emotionally charged and upset about these topics. And so I want to share just a little bit about the systematic review that came out. I will also have a link to a PDF that I have been putting together of communication research. And this is an open access article that you can get readily. And we will have that link in the show notes as well. So very quickly, GLP. GLP stands for Gestalt Language Processing. Okay, Gestalt Language Processing. NLA, which you might hear too, is Natural Language Acquisition. Okay. And so those are words that you may hear. A GLP, sometimes people refer to people that are taking in language a certain way, that way. Other people that might be taking language a different way from the theory, if you subscribe to that, is, an analytic processor. Those are just some of the terms that have been created for people that are talking about that. So you might have see information, a child's been identified as a GLP. And that's something that people say, Gestalt Language Processor. And so the people who wrote the systematic review did a talk at ASHA as well. And I'll share a little bit about that at the end. And there is information in this article about kind of the history of Gestalt Language Processing, which I thought was interesting because it is really very, very popular on social media. So the case study that I want to share with you today was from a BCBA. A BCBA reached out to me and said, "Rose, our therapeutic team is really having a hard time navigating Gestalt language processing and how to collaborate. The speech therapists are very into Gestalt language processing. The BCBAs are just saying there's not a lot of evidence. And so we're having a hard time collaborating around that. And I thought it was interesting, the topic that she shared. And so I also did an Instagram post about this, and some people, a parent weighed in. So I want to share this with you because sometimes in my CEU courses, I'm sharing more general information and more general frameworks that you can then take into your workplace to use for when these conflicts arise, because they will. We are doing a course that's going to be way more specific in August. I know that may seem far away, in August of 2025, but I plan our curated professional development experiences for the general public and also members of the ABA Speech Connection 6 to 12 months in advance. So stay tuned for that. Put that on your calendar. And this person was a BCBA and said, you know what? We really have done our assessment and we want to set a goal for this student being able to answer questions about personal safety. Personal safety questions would be, general examples would be, what is your name? What is your mom's name? What is your dad's name? What's your address? What's your phone number? Exactly what we're saying there, personal safety. I love personal safety questions because they're important. They're important for our students to be able to convey this information should they get lost. And a lot of my students, when deemed appropriate, have worked on personal safety questions. I also have made content for Instagram and LinkedIn, YouTube Shorts, wherever you see me on social media, and is part of our Autism IEP Goal Bank, which about 50,000 people are utilizing, which is really cool. I love being able to help in that very specific way. So this BCBA said, we really want to work on personal safety questions, and they work in a multidisciplinary clinic. And they said, the speech language pathologist said that they're working with a student who's a GLP. So is a Gestalt Language Processor, to go back to our jargon. And they are not in the right stage to be able to answer a question. So that is part of natural language acquisition, or GLP, that there's these different stages. People that subscribe to this theory, there's different stages where people are acquiring language. And I actually took the Meaningful Speech course. I talked to Alex about 4 years ago. We did a quick Zoom or a phone call, and she was very nice at the time. And she said, I'll let you into the course. And I watched it. I watched the 10-hour course because I wanted to see what everybody was talking about. And there are these different stages that people are in. And so I kind of had heard about those stages, hadn't thought about them because I'm not really utilizing this framework in my therapy. And the BCBA said, we're having a hard time because we really feel like this learner needs to work on these personal safety questions as a way to work on comprehension, as a way to work on overall safety. And the speech language pathologist on the team, who they have the same employer, which makes it all more difficult, is saying that the student is not ready to work on answering any types of questions. And I really had never thought about something that's so very specific. And so obviously I'm keeping this person anonymous, but I was happy that they shared this with me because I wanted to share these very specific examples with you because you may be facing these questions too. Now, I don't have all the answers because this is a way that collaboration and ethics work, is that we have these frameworks, we have these guidelines. I love to use Dr. Broadhead's article a lot, that I talk about that in our CEU course. That I will link below in the show notes. And the one thing he says is are you familiar with the treatment? If you're not, find out about it. And so I've done some of those things where I've shared resources about Gestalt language processing. And it's hard when we come across something like this. Is there a right and wrong answer? How are we going to navigate that for the students so they're getting the treatment that they deserve and that they need? And that's going to help them on their communication journey. I know that we both come from a place where we want to help others. And it has just become such an us versus them mentality that it's really hard. It's really, really hard. I made a Instagram reel, which is a short form video about this particular case study, and I had a lot of comments. But one comment I want to share because I thought this was really, really helpful, and it was from a parent. The parent said, "We have come across this exact scenario where my child, the BCBA thinks we should be working on personal safety questions. My child is in a certain stage of Gestalt language processing." And I apologize if I'm saying these things wrong because it's not my area of expertise. And traditionally in that stage, you wouldn't ask questions. But she said, "We have decided as a team," which I love, I love that. "We have decided as a team that we are going to work on answering personal safety questions. And it's important for the student. We came to that conclusion all together, and it was a collaborative effort." That was the essence, not verbatim. Okay, I don't have my phone in my hand, but that was the essence of her response. And I said, "Thank you so much for giving me this feedback." That's the thing. I can share with you frameworks for how to navigate these ethical scenarios, whether you're both employed, the speech therapist and BCBA, in the same facility, or whether one's coming in as an outside consultant. There's going to be a lot of different dynamics. The thing that I tell people is we are ethically called to collaborate, and we are ethically called to use evidence-based practice as well. And I think that's important. We can talk about these frameworks and get familiar with the treatment. Can you put it into behavioral terms? Can you come up with a solution on your own? Can you compromise when possible? These are all things that are in our ethical codes and guidelines. I know because I used to teach the class at Kent State till I got too busy for future BCBAs. But I think we have to make these in the trenches decisions, not from a place of us versus them. We need to look at this holistically as what is best for the client. What is the scope and sequence of what is important for our student on their communication journey? And I think that that's important. I'm not looking over your shoulder about what you're doing with your clients. We went to school for a long time, speech therapists and BCBAs, to be analytical, to be systematic, to be compassionate, to be caring. And I believe, especially if you're listening to my podcast, that you are making compassionate and scientific decisions out there in your therapy rooms. You can't be worried about what an influencer from social media is going to say about your intervention plan. That's not the way that the real world works. You are smart. You are kind, you are compassionate, you are scientific. Make these decisions in the best interest of your clients. That's just one very specific case study that I wanted to share with you because I feel like sometimes I talk more big picture, even though I try to loop in the Gestalt case study, I try to loop in the verbal imitation case study, I try to loop in the AAC case study in that course that we have about ethics, which is cool because it counts as an ethics CEU. We'll link it at the bottom of the show notes, but I wanted to give you that specific case study that's kind of come up in my dealings with people recently. So I hope that that's helpful information for you. If that makes you think of another case study that you think we should offer either in a podcast form, or if you're doing a great job, if your therapeutic team is doing a great job collaborating around this topic, I would love to know. We do have a podcast coming out about different case studies. We plan to do this every once in a while. If something comes across my desk and I think that it would help the ABA speech community, we will definitely do it. And then in August of 2025, we are going to do a more in-depth talk and CEU for speech therapists, BCBAs, RBTs around these same similar topics that will also count as an ethics CEU. The last thing I wanted to touch on is the systematic review. So there is this article that came out, Systematic Review of Interventions Based on Gestalt Language Processing and Natural Language Acquisition, GLP-NLA, there's those acronyms again, Clinical Implications of Absence of Evidence and Cautions for Clinicians and Parents. These authors, some of them, I believe some of them, were at ASHA and they did a talk and I went to it. It was an overflow situation. So this is an open access article. I will have a link for you to access that article in the bottom of the show notes. And they really did this to determine whether interventions related to Gestalt language processing are effective for individuals with communication disability in relation to their language, their communication, and their behavior. And they looked at all these different scientific databases. They do a good job of telling you exactly what they scoured, the research databases. And they also, what I think they do a nice job of is talking a little bit about the history of Gestalt language processing. For me, that was interesting because I see it everywhere on social media. So to break it down, they talk about Marge LeBlanc and Prezant and Ann Peters. I want to get everybody's names correctly. And it's very interesting information. They do summarize the article to say that there is an apparent lack of empirical evidence in the form of treatment studies to examine, evaluate, or support NLA for children identified as Gestalt language processors. And what I think is interesting, and I'm sure that people that are using Gestalt language processing are probably trying to do a lot of research potentially in this area. And I know that there is a gap from the research to the intervention that we do as clinicians. And we have that evidence-based triangle and external evidence and internal evidence and clinician report and parent report and client report. Those are all things that we need to consider. And I absolutely 100% agree with that evidence-based triangle. And I think just talking about the ethical responsibility that we have for being scientific, for being analytical in how we are providing intervention, and also that compassionate side that I have seen people be very polarized. And I'm very calloused inside and almost dead inside because I've had an online business for almost 8 years. So people say mean things to me on the daily. And people that, if you look at the beginning of my podcast, the people that I had on my podcast, I don't think they would ever come back on my podcast because I am a BCBA and a speech therapist. I was way back in the day as well, but I feel like it's been so polarized that people don't really want to be part of ABA Speech, which I think is really, really sad because the work that we're doing here at ABA Speech is to help all autistic learners find a way to communicate with the world. And the way that we really do that at ABA Speech is by strengthening therapy teams one CEU course at a time. So if you haven't taken our ethics course where we talk about collaboration around Gestalt, verbal imitation, and AAC. I will link it at the bottom. It is something that you get access to when you're a member of the ABA Speech Connection. We do new live courses every single month, but we have a CEU library of over 30 hours of content. And really my idea and mission in life is to build a bridge between speech therapists and BCBAs. Does it mean that we're going to agree on every single thing? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And this is one of those areas where we're really having a hard time. But I do think that we can compassionately come together and collaborate. Because when we don't do that, not only do our clients lose, but we lose as speech therapists and we lose as BCBAs and we lose as parents because it causes a lot of undue stress and conflict. And I just don't think that we need to have that much of it. There's enough going on in the world that our therapy rooms shouldn't feel this heavy. I know that you are doing great things out in the world. If you have a case study that you think we should tackle, that you want to cover with me on a 15-minute call, you can always contact me through my website, abaspeech.org. Thank you to all of my connectors out there, my members of the ABA Speech Connection. And if you are not a member yet, why not? You should be. We have a really great time. I've had a lot of people from the connection on the podcast as well. Thank you so much for being a member of the community. And make sure that you look at the show notes so that you can get access to the ABA Speech Connection, take our ethics course all about Gestalt, and you can get access to the systematic review. Until next time, I'll see you soon.